going live on Facebook, and I think you have, if you look at put on your smile, you have two people spotlighted there.
Oh, how did that do that?
2 minutes. One minute.
Everybody can mute at this point.
Okay.
Recording.
Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Everybody ready? Oh, hi, everybody. I didn't realize I was not on the right scene. So 1 moment, please.
Live. I mean,
We are live.
I think the whole world is ready for us to go live at this point.
It is a Monday, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Daily with Doc. My name is Becca Dukes, and yes, I am the hostess of this program. And usually I do know, how to do everything. But today we are just going to make a great day, and so thankful that you are here joining us on Daily with Doc. This program is being brought to you by DailywithDoc.com, which is a website you can find all of our replays on, plus some special episodes that we have going on with some of our favorite mentors when it comes to nutrition with pharmacist Ben Fuchs, Dr. Joel Wallach, and others. We are excited to have one of those others here with us as well today. But before I move on to the introduction of our guest, I just want to remind everybody that if you were invited to watch this program by somebody specific, make sure that you get back with them and tell them thank you. Thank you for taking the time and caring enough to share information with you that is empowering, giving you more knowledge so that you can make wiser decisions about what you put in your mouth and in your environment. Also, if you are already working with somebody, then make sure that you get back with them and say, hey, I listened to that program and they talked about something that I'm really interested in. Can you give me more information? So we do have a team of certified holistic health coaches available for those who have never spoken to anybody about anything that we talk about in this program, and they are not currently working with a coach. You can reach my team at 855-949-3377 or go to our website, DailywithDoc.com, and you will find the phone number there and also the option in the menu that says contact. When you click that contact, you can send us an email and include if you're working with somebody and whatever questions you may have, and we will have somebody get back with you, if not myself. And then if you are not already subscribed to our weekly newsletter, make sure that you do that too. You can find that in the website and click. And if you have questions for Dr. Wallach and want to know what would be the best protocol for you based on symptoms that are going on, we will make sure that we get those questions answered for you as well. Well, I want to just welcome everybody once again. If you are out in YouTube watching our program, and while we're live, of course, and you would like to join us live here, or if you're watching a replay and want to join us live sometime, we are here on Monday, Wednesday, some Thursdays and Fridays, well, Fridays usually, at DailywithDocZoom.com. That is DailywithDocZoom.com, all one word, and it's at 12 Pacific time. That's middle of the day, top of the hour, folks. 12 Pacific time, 1 o'clock Mountain, 2 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern. And wherever you are in this world, just do a Google search, say, what time is it at my time at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and they will let you know through Google or Siri or Alexa what time it would be in your current time zone. Well, I just want to welcome to today's program, as we are going to be talking about fats and carbohydrates, folks, and what exactly they are, how they work within the body. And I can't think of a better person to share this information with us than Dr. Judy Reynolds. Now, Dr. Reynolds is a lifetime learner. She has been a student for a long time, but not just a student. She's also been a professor. She has also been, or is part of the professional scientists for the equine animal area, in addition to being a formulator and a technical advisor and all these different things that come to nutrition in animals. And folks, I don't know about you and I, but when you talk mammals, we're classified as mammals, folks. So Dr. Judy Reynolds, thank you so much for joining us once again on Daily with Doc. I know you have got a presentation for us that's going to help us understand. From my understanding, it's going to help us understand what exactly are fats and carbohydrates and how our body uses them.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks again for the invitation. In nutrition, we sort of need to understand things from the smallest to the biggest. So it's really biochemistry and even chemistry at the beginning. The very small things are chemistry, like the atoms. We know carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen are atoms, which means they're so small, you can't break them down without a nuclear type reaction. I mean, they are the smallest that we worry about. I mean, people say now there are subunits of those even, but there always will be probably. But anyway, so in chemistry, we learn about atoms. And then in biochemistry, we learn about the atoms and molecules that are important to us in living things. And biology includes both the plants, the bacteria, the animals, and everything. But then when we go into animals, as we go up, we start looking at the larger parts. And so we'll have molecules, and then they will form into our different organs, and then organ systems, and then the whole animal. So I'll go ahead and bring in my PowerPoint presentation. And again, that, this is going down to the smaller pieces so that we can more easily understand the bigger pieces. We talk all the time about carbohydrates and fats and protein, but what really are they? So I'm going to bring this one back up, and you're going to recognize this. Now, don't freak out, don't panic, but I'm going to bring this up. This is one of the ones that I used in our discussion on B vitamins, fat soluble or water soluble vitamins. But what this shows us, just so we can go back, we call it intermediary metabolism when we're bringing the carbohydrates, the amino acids, which are parts of protein, and the fats in, and all of those things get broken down in this complex system to yield energy. And energy is just something that we use to breathe, to move, to stay alive, to run. All those different things all require energy. So when we eat food, we eat large complex molecules, and then we break them down into something like glucose, or it can be bigger than that, but a sugar an amino acid or a fatty acid, and then we break it down for energy. So that's basically what we are doing this time. Okay, let's start with glucose. Glucose is one of the 3 main sugars. We call them carbohydrates if they are in the ratio of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen with a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So this is the basic glucose. This is the one that raises your blood sugar. This is the one that we talk about all the time. So the chemical formula is 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, 6 oxygens, and it's formed in this type of a ring. It's got 6 sides, but one of them is oxygen, and then the carbon is up on top of here. But that's just what the molecule looks like. Now, you've probably heard of the 2 other simple sugars, which are fructose, and there are some bad things that we've learned about fructose that we got to be aware of. And then the other one is galactose, and that's the one that has to do with milk in mammals. And the only difference there, they have the same chemical formula, but these little H's and OH's are just arranged a little differently. But it makes a big difference because we absorb glucose, fructose, and galactose completely differently. And I'll just go through that. Well, I've got this one up. Glucose gets absorbed into our blood. And if we eat a lot of glucose at once, if we eat a very sugary meal at once, our blood glucose will go up. And the problem with that is our body needs to maintain glucose in the blood within a fairly narrow range. Otherwise, other things don't work in the rest of the body. So our body hurries up, and what it does is it puts insulin into the blood, and that insulin helps the glucose go into cells, which then lowers the amount of glucose in the blood. That's a very important thing. Now, the difference with fructose, the fruit sugar, and when we look at table sugar, I'll show you that in a minute, but when we look at table sugar, it's actually 1 glucose hooked to 1 fructose. So it's a 50-50. But that fructose, the problem with that is it doesn't go into the blood and become blood sugar. It goes directly to the liver where it has to be changed. And I'll show you some molecules to make this a little more clear. But the difference there is fructose does not give you blood sugar, which could be a good thing. But if there's too much of it going to the liver, you end up with what's called fatty liver. Because what your liver basically does is turn fructose sugar into fat and deposit it in your liver. And you've probably heard of non-alcoholic fatty liver. That's what you end up with, which we don't want. And there's also alcoholic fatty liver. Okay, and then the galactose is special because babies don't have a fully usable digestive system yet. They're not going to, they don't need that right away. They have to develop that. So your galactose molecules actually can be absorbed through the mouth and through the stomach very quickly and very easily compared to the other digestive processes. So, and all those, I can answer questions or we can go into them at another time. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about what carbohydrates really are. So each one of those little hexagonal things here is a sugar, like I just showed you, a glucose, okay? But here's a thought. If most people have not thought much about nutrition, you probably don't realize that your carbohydrates are all strings of sugars. Different kinds of sugars make different kinds of molecules. And here's one we used to do in biology class to help give people this understanding. If you put sugar in your mouth, it tastes sweet, and you know that. So what they do in biology class is they'll have students eat a saltine type cracker, and you put it in your mouth and you just keep chewing it, and your salivary amylase, the enzyme that breaks these little bonds here, you've got what's called an alpha bond in between each one. And that amylase in your saliva will actually break these bonds, and all of a sudden you start to taste the sweetness. You taste the sugar, because all starch is a whole bunch of sugars, a whole bunch of glucose together. And so these alpha bonds are easily broken by amylase, and they go into glucose and they become energy, just like glucose does. But if we have too much sugar at the same time, And I'm going to talk in this presentation about both humans and horses, because when you compare things, it can sometimes give you a little better insight into what's going on. And with horses, it's easy to give them too much sugar because they're not sugar eaters. There's very little sugar in forages, and so they're not used to eating it. So if they get too much sugar, that will actually go into the back of their intestine, to their large intestine, their cecum, and it'll have to be fermented by bacteria, turned into lactic acid, which is the same thing that happens when your muscles work and you don't have enough oxygen. You get lactic acid, and then it still becomes energy as long as the pH is normal in those areas. But the point here being, in your mind, if you picture starch, and then we're going to go through the other carbohydrates here as we go along. If you picture these things as glucose or another sugar molecule joined together, and then there are different bonds, and there are different enzymes that break the different bonds. So this is how we start with only a few building blocks, and we can build very complex molecules that are going to act completely differently in the body. All right, I'm just taking one here that both horses and people can eat. And so this is a sucrose table sugar. It has 1 fructose, 1 glucose, and the bond is cleaved by an amylase enzyme. As I said, this bond right here is going to be cleaved, giving you the 1 fructose and the 1 glucose. But then what happens? The fructose has to go to the liver, and the glucose just gets metabolized into energy. Okay, and this is the in humans. The other thing, when I was doing research a long time ago, and I've always been worried about the amount of sugar, glucose, those kinds of things in horse feeds, I was thinking, well, I wonder if the same thing happens in horses, because if not, fructose may be a way to give energy to horses without the blood sugar high. Because if you're riding a horse and you've got a blood sugar high, you've got issues. Okay. No one actually did that research for me. I haven't been able to find out. So at this point, I'm assuming that it's probably the same for both humans and horses. In other words, it would go to the liver and go to the liver here, and then energy can be produced after it leaves. First, it's liver fat. And then if you need that fat from your liver, then it can go back and help produce energy. But the main thing to keep in mind here is that your glucose and your fructose are 2 different simple sugars, but they act differently within the body. Okay. Now we're going to go to the longer chains. So we've talked about the disaccharide, which is sugar. It's got 2, which means disaccharide. Now we're going to go to polysaccharide. That means more than 2 sugars. And what happens there is we can keep adding those together and we get something called fiber. So it's really counterintuitive that our grass and vegetables and all of these things are actually made up of strings of sugars, but they are. So once you get that picture in your mind, it makes it a little easier to understand. And then the different ones are going to react differently. Okay, so let's look at the digestible polysaccharides. Okay, more than 3 sugars together, but they are digestible. Okay, first of all, they are indigestible by human or horse enzymes, but bacteria digest them in our colon or a horse's cecum. But then they become volatile fatty acids, which means they never become simple sugars. So the fibers become short chain fats and become energy. We have one called cellulose. You may have heard of that. And then it's made of glucose units with beta bonds. And the other one is hemicellulose, which is xylose. And I've got pictures of these coming. Xylose units with beta bonds. Okay. And then there is another one. It's an indigestible polysaccharide, and it's called lignin. Nobody can digest that except termites and fire. Termites and fire. So when you've got an oak tree standing out there with all the bark and everything, termites or it'll burn. Otherwise, it's not going to provide energy. Okay, it'll make more sense with the pictures. Okay, here's cellulose.
Dr.
Again,
Judy,
go ahead. Yep.
before you move on to to this next part
Okay.
of this, I want to go back to your dietary fiber.
Okay.
And that explains why, like if you're doing keto and you've got carbohydrates and you've got dietary fiber, you can minus the fiber from the total carbohydrates to get your net
Exactly. Exactly. Because the key thing here, and I'm going to get on my soapbox in a minute here about how we label our carbohydrates, but that's absolutely right. When we talk about carbs, there are so many different kinds of carbs and they act so differently that if we just call them all carbs, we're going to be so confused. We won't understand things like what you just brought up, Becca, about they are not going to lead to blood sugar or any of these issues that we worry about with keto diets. So yes.
As you mentioned that, just this light bulb went on. I'm like,
yeah,
oh, that's why.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Sorry for interrupting.
No. But this is why I think trying to get that understanding, that background understanding, helps things make sense. That's why I like to do this. But okay. So now we're looking at cellulose. All it is, it's the same sugar we talked about before, glucose, but it's got a different kind of bond. The beta bond actually is in a different place. But the important thing about that is beta bonds are cleaved by a bacterial cellulase. Any ACE is an enzyme. ASE at the end of it means it's an enzyme. So what happens there is the bacteria, it's got to be back in the colon and the cecum before this is going to happen. Okay. So the fibers have to go through us. Our vegetables, the hay for the horse, everything has to go back. Then we get our glucose and then bacteria ferment them. And we get, if you've ever heard of volatile fatty acids, these are little bitty fats. Volatile means they actually can go up in the air. They're so small, they can go up in the air. So the 2-carbon one is called acetic acid. The 3-carbon one is called propionic acid. And the 4-carbon one is called butyric acid. And you may hear these in some of the, the formulations. You may see some of these things coming up, but then of course they're so small, they can be easily turned into energy. Okay, so that's cellulose. Now we have another one just to show you, you can still use beta bonds and hook things together, but this is a different sugar, and this is a 5-carbon sugar. So it's only got a 5-carbon ring. But again, you have to have bacterial enzymes to cleave it. Okay, so you're getting the same thing. Bacteria ferment it, you get the same 3 volatile fatty acids, and you get energy. So we can have both cellulose and hemicellulose in our food, and they're just different sugars. This is called xylose, this particular 5-carbon sugar. There are a bunch of 5-carbon sugars, a bunch of 6-carbon sugars. We're going to see a 3-carbon sugar in a minute when we get to the fats. But, just kind of to give you a picture. And like I said, with lignin, this is, I put a U there because it means undigestible or indigestible. Nobody can digest this. No energy comes from it, but it does push things through the digestive tract, which may or may not be a good thing, right? And then it's going in the feces or it's going in the manure. So those are our basic things about our carbohydrate molecules made out of sugar. Okay, does anybody have questions about that? And then I'll go on to my talk about carbs and what we probably should do.
Go for it.
Okay, so carbs, again, when you say carbs, it means anything with a C6H12O6 ratio. And there are so many things that includes. It includes the one sugar, which is a saccharide. Disaccharide is 2. Polysaccharides are more, and they can be many, many, many more. But since they're metabolized so differently, like I just showed, it doesn't make sense to call a diet a high carb or a low carb diet. We have to define the carbs better. So what I put here is, it's very misunderstood. In animal nutrition, we pretty much separate soluble from insoluble fibers, but in human, we don't. And in human, we really need to start doing something so that it makes more sense. Okay. Since they're so different, which I just showed, we really shouldn't be calling them all carbs. Okay. Within human nutrition, humans can really choose low carb diets, which would be a keto type diet, or a moderate or a high carbohydrate diet for different reasons, using different types of carbohydrates, right? We can, that's one of the problems with human nutrition is we can eat just about anything, but is it helping us? Are we getting what we need? And that's where our problem comes in a lot. When we look at horses, they're going to eat probably 80 to 90% of their diet as forages. And those are structural complex carbohydrates, like I just showed you, that get digested in the large intestine. And they don't typically eat sugars and disaccharides and things like that. Now, they can be fed too much starch, which can be a problem for horses because it's easily broken down into sugar and then you get sugar. Okay, so within animals, there are different ways to do it. So it's not even one simple solution, but soluble usually means starches and sugars. Easily broken down by your amylase is the name of an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. It's called amylase. You have a salivary amylase. You have gastric in the stomach. You have pancreatic amylase. You know, I mean, you have, depending on the location, you have all of these different ways to break down your carbohydrates. Okay. They're also called non-structural versus structural. They're called non-fiber versus fiber. So this doesn't get even more confusing. The easy ones to break down, the sugars and starches, are called non-structural or non-fiber. That's all the same thing. Okay. So when we look at this, we have horses are going to require high total carb rations. And in the horse world, you know, they talk about low and high carb rations again, but you can't have a low carb ration for a horse because 80 to 90% of their diet is fibers, which are all carbohydrate. That's what they are. Okay. Now with horses, you can feed up to maximum of 20% fat in the concentrate, which you would call the grain or the feed type of part of the ration. But still, most of the ration is actually fibers. If you try to feed more than 20% fat to a horse, they're going to look at you like you're nuts. And they're just not going to eat it. So good luck. However, on another topic for another day, you can feed up to maybe 15% and so drastically increase the performance in horses that a horse not fed an added fat diet cannot compete. And that includes racehorses, all kinds of horses and everything. So it's a big thing in the horse world that we're switching over from grain-based diets to added fat. We call it added fat. It's not high fat. We call it added fat diet. Okay, now let's look at our fat molecules. So if you think about the molecules, the main two ones that actually provide energy for the body are the sugars that we just looked at. And then that is the quick to digest, quick to absorb, quick to use type of an energy source.
Dr. Judy?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted for some reason.
Okay.
We do have a question wanting to know what is an example of a lignin?
The bark of a tree. Any plant that gets, it's not an animal thing. It's a plant thing. And remember, plants need structure. They need, if you're going to be a tree, as you're growing from a little bitty sprout up to a tree, you get to a certain point and you have to start adding structure or you'll fall over. The wind will blow you over. Make sense? So
Okay.
any part of a tree, the brush and things like that. That's where the lignin comes in. Does that make sense to the questioner?
Okay, so
Okay.
then when we're talking about that is with with fiber or sugars for the lignin?
Lignin
I
is, it's actually made of those same sugar molecules. They're just put together in a way that they won't come apart.
Okay,
So when the
because I know
plants, sorry,
like birch bark is where we get xylitol from.
yeah,
which
and
is-
but that's got to be, yeah, that could be a component of it, right? I mean, bark is a complex tissue like our skin. It's not just one thing. But the lignin is that really firm, strong tissue that allows a tree to become huge,
Okay.
right?
All
Like
right,
the
thank
corn
you.
stalk. The corn stalk.
Mhm.
You know, we harvest the corn off the ear, but the corn stalk is not edible.
For cows, we used to chop it up for cows, let it ferment a little bit, and that's what we would
Yes.
feed the cows, especially the dairy.
Yeah, that's the key. You fermented it, and it also contains some cellulose and or hemicellulose, which when it ferments, the bacteria are breaking it down. Yes. But whatever lignin part there is in them will not break down even by those bacteria. Right?
Okay.
Makes sense? Okay.
Awesome. So we have one more.
Okay.
So if you're doing a moderate to higher carb diet, should you be eating less fat? Are you going to get to that?
Yes, but let me go ahead and address that. You only have 2 energy sources for all the energy you need. And I'll make a caveat here because people are assuming that protein is also an energy source. Protein, and I'll show you this in a minute. Protein has a carbohydrate side chain, and it will become a carbohydrate when you break it apart. But the energy required to do that, and the fact that you have to get rid of, if you wanted to use protein just for an energy source, you have to get rid of the amino group to do that. And that takes a lot of energy. So yes, you do get, when you break down protein, you do get some carbohydrate, but it's not a good way to do it. Okay. So there's only 2 choices. And this is another thing that I think is so key to understanding nutrition is you don't have any other choices. So if you have a low carbohydrate diet, you have to add fat in order to get the same caloric content. Okay, let's assume we're not trying to lose weight or we're not trying to gain weight right now. Let's just assume. So you have to get all your energy from some combination of carbohydrates and fats. But then remember, we're going to separate those carbohydrates into the sugars and starches, which we can easily digest, and the cellulose and hemicellulose and all those things that are hard to digest, that are in our vegetables and all that kind of stuff. So the answer to the question is whenever you lower the carbohydrate, you have to add fat. It's the only choice you have. I know that, again, that seems so counterintuitive, but almost all the foods we eat are a combination of carbohydrates, simple and complex. You know, the soluble and the insoluble carbohydrates are in almost everything, and so are the fats, with the exception of a pure fat. And we don't, you know, when we talk about oils here, we don't want to use oils because the process to remove the oil from the plant destroys the nature of the fat. And that's why we say no fried foods, no oils. If you're baking a cake, use butter. Don't use oil, right? That's that kind of thing. But almost everything we eat is going to have some protein, some carbohydrate, and some fat. And in each meal, we want some protein, some carbohydrate, and some fat. And let me just throw this in quickly. The whole thing about fat, trying to have a low-fat diet, started somewhere between, well, it was somewhere in the early 19th century. And it was really a way to sell artificial fats. And then it became, well, fats cause heart disease, right? Cholesterol or fats, they cause heart disease. And it was not correct. So we've all been led down this. Remember when everything you bought had a low fat, low fat, low fat, low fat, or no fat? Again, if you take that fat out, what do you have to do to that food? If you're going to get the same amount of calories, you have to add sugar. So all the time we were trying to eat low fat, we were eating higher and higher and higher sugar, right? So it's a trade-off. Okay.
Well,
Good.
I think,
Go ahead.
as far as being satiated, we get satiated better with fats.
Absolutely.
Sugar, you just want more and more and more.
Right.
And you're talking about carbohydrates.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Now let's look at this for 1 second. This might tie in. And if there's still a question, just go ahead and let me know. But what happens with fats is they are the long-term storage part for energy. Okay. Sugars are the quick one. Eat fruit, keep going. Eat a bunch of fruit, keep going. These are when we need to store the fat. We need to store it for pregnancy, for winter, for, what about the animals that hibernate? Oh my gosh. Well, what happens is by doing a fat, remember, you still got carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen here, right? But we took most of the oxygens out and we made these long chains of carbons and we put the hydrogens on to solidify them. But we took most of the oxygen out of this molecule, right? So we made it into a more condensed, heavier storage form for long term. So that's called a fat. And I'll show you how they break up in a minute. But remember, each carbon atom has 4 attachments and they will stick to something. So basically a saturated fat has all the hydrogens everywhere. And then when you start having unsaturated fats, all that means is the carbon double bonded somewhere in here and a hydrogen is not there anymore. Okay. And if it's got 3 saturated bonds, then that's a totally different kind of molecule. And what happens is you can see how this has all its hydrogens on top and bottom and the carbons are in a string. So it's a straight line. You get a straight line. If you put 1 double bond and take a hydrogen out, the molecule bends. And if you take 2 or 3 out, the molecule bends a lot and it doesn't fit in the same space anymore. And that affects your membrane solidity because our membranes are made out of fats. Remember, a membrane is a place that separates the cell from what's outside the cell, right? What's inside the cell from what's outside the cell is separated by a membrane. And our membranes need both saturated fats to be strong, to not move around much. Very important in places where we're worried about the heat affecting things. And then we have the saturated bonds where they're a little more flexible, they move around. And in that situation, it's where we're worried about cold. So if you live in the Arctic versus the equator, you're going to want different fatty acids in your membranes. And I'm trying to do concepts here, not trying to, but when it starts to make sense in your mind, why do you need some fatty acids that are saturated, that are straight, and some that are curved, and some that gives them different properties? Okay. So here's what a triglyceride, everybody's heard of triglycerides. If you go to a doctor, they'll check your triglycerides and tell you if they think they're high or low or this kind of thing. I'm not going to comment on that, but anyway, that's what they do. So a triglyceride means triglyceride. Glycerol is a sugar. This is that 3-carbon sugar I was telling you about. 3-carbon sugar, because it's, 1, 2, 3. And then each one of those attaches to this fatty acid. And this can be really long. It can be anywhere from just a few carbons to quite a few carbons in the 20s, right? So it attaches to 3 of these. Now, what's going to happen with that in order to absorb it? You can see it's a pretty big molecule. Okay. So to get through that membrane, it's not going to go all by itself. I think we talked last time about how cholesterol does go through. Cholesterol, the molecule, does not have a charge, and it just goes through the membrane. It doesn't have to be broken apart and put back together, but this one does. Okay, so what happens here is we have a lipase. That means ACE is an enzyme, lip is lipid, which means fat. It breaks the bonds at the number 1 carbon and the number 3 carbon. So these two pieces come off, and then the middle one is absorbed right with the glycerol. So those three, all of it gets absorbed. And then as soon as it gets absorbed, it's put right back together. There's two possibilities. Put right back together the way it was, or second thing, the glycerol goes through sugar metabolism, the intermediate metabolism, like any other sugar, and you get energy. And this is what's called beta oxidation. We have enzymes that will come along and cut it at every 2 carbon unit. Cut, 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 cut. And you get all these little 2 carbon units, and then they just go right into the same thing and produce energy. Now, for all of us that talk about frankenfats, fried oils, what happens with them is they get heated to 400 degrees. They're sitting in a vat, and these are delicate molecules right here. These fats are delicate molecules, and they get all broken apart so that they don't even look normal. And these enzymes aren't going to work to go along and cut those 2 carbon units off, right? So the fat is no longer normal. It doesn't fit the normal enzyme system. It doesn't provide energy. What it does end up with is a bunch of weird little fats that our body's trying to get rid of. One of the places it gets rid of them is on your artery walls, which can lead to a heart attack if the artery walls are already damaged. And the most current belief right now for the danger of heart disease and for plaques in the arteries is that you're deficient in vitamin C, vitamin E, selenium, and a couple other nutrients. So your artery walls are not strong. And then a hole opens up, and you start to bleed through that artery. And then these fats, whether they're good fats or bad fats, are there, and they plug it. Okay, and that's, you're going to hear different things out there, but the theories change over time. The one thing that we know after going through all of this, let's have low fat, let's have low cholesterol. What we know is no matter if your cholesterol is 150 or 350, you don't have any higher, if you control everything else, you don't have any higher chance of having a heart attack. So it's not the cholesterol. What really is problematic is high sugar in the diet, because that leads to degradation of vitamin C. And like I said, not enough vitamin C, you can't keep your artery walls strong. And that's where you're going to get more problems. Atherosclerosis, hard to say, and heart problems. Okay, so now this is a different way of looking at it that you may have heard in a lot of other places, but there's been a lot of research done on it. And everybody's welcome to do their own research, look things up. I'll be glad to answer questions. But like I said, by this type of a presentation, looking at these things, I'm trying to tie things in so that if you can picture in your mind, you have certain molecules. These are compacted for storage in fat. They're the long-term storage, whereas your sugars and starches are your short-term storage. Okay, we're at a little bit of a change here because I'm going to talk about protein. So any more questions?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Dr. Judy.
Please. Okay. All right. So protein is the third main molecule. The difference between the carbohydrates and fats is that it has nitrogen also. Okay. So every protein contains amino acids. Amino acids all contain a central carbon atom right there. They also contain a carbohydrate group. And then they contain a NH3 or an amino group. Okay, when you break down an amino acid, if you cut this, this goes in and becomes urine. This is your amino group. Then you get a small carbohydrate, and that goes into that process of energy. But each amino acid has, attached to all this, each amino acid has a different group right here. They call it the R group, and it's different for every amino acid. So when leucine, phenylalanine, glycine, all these that are amino acids have a different group here. And because of that, they do a different function in the body. And, we're not going to go and talk about each different one and each function, but that's to separate them. Now there's one other group of molecules, but it doesn't have to do with digestion and all those things. And that's the nucleic acids. The nucleic acids also have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. They are, of course, in our genes. They're the DNA and the RNA that are used to form the protein. So they're the blueprints. The DNA and RNA are blueprints that form the protein so we can do the structure in our bodies. Okay, but this is not, again, you can get energy out of them when you break them down. And if you are starving or even fasting long term, the first thing your body is going to start doing is breaking down your protein. So you have to be careful how you do that, because a lot of people do that to lose weight, but you don't necessarily want to lose protein weight. Okay, you might want to be losing fat weight, and that's where the keto and those kinds of diets come in. Okay. So what I did here is just simplify the digestion process by the different groups. Here's our indigestible fiber, our digestible fiber, our fats, our proteins, and our sugars and starches. Our indigestible fiber, this is the stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Indigestible fiber all the way through. Okay, that's that lignin and parts of the cellulose and hemicellulose that just don't get absorbed. Here's our fermentable fiber. It has to go all the way through the stomach and small intestine, get to the large intestine, and then it comes out, but it becomes volatile fatty acids. Okay, then our fats typically come out in the small intestine. Again, if you get too many fats, too much for what can be taken care of here, it will go here, and then it's we're losing them. Okay, that's when you get the runny stool, the fatty stool, the same with the horse, runny diarrhea. If you overfeed what that particular part can be absorbed, can be metabolized here at the beginning of the tract. Okay. And then what do we got left? Proteins. Our proteins also come out of the small intestine as amino acids, the building blocks of protein. And our sugars and starches come out right away. Again, the amylase starts breaking them down even in the mouth. They come out as glucose into blood sugar here. So hopefully, again, what I was trying to do here is get you to understand the main building blocks, how they fit together. The biggest thing that surprises most people is that your fibers are sugar units tied together. I mean, if anybody said that, you'd go, what? That doesn't make any sense, but it's the way it is. Okay. All right. So a summary of the energy. The two things that provide energy are carbohydrates and fats. The type of carbohydrate or fatty acid affects the digestibility and physiology. That's huge. And we just skimmed the surface here. Protein's not an efficient source of carbohydrate. And here, for two different reasons, actually. Many disorders are associated with grains. We know of the gluten issue. That is huge. Again, grains can become a very large portion of a human diet. So when we look at gluten and things like that with digestibility of grains in humans, that's where the main issue is with grains. And plus they have genetically modified the grains, made them totally different than they were in the past. In horse nutrition, it was actually a little bit different because each individual grain, we got a grain high if we fed oats. And if we fed corn, it's very indigestible, and it's a poor quality protein source. And corn has a tendency to provide to be moldy, and there's a mold that actually kills horses. So I don't even recommend feeding corn to horses. And then barley was another feed that was commonly fed to horses, especially in Europe and things like that. The problem with that is the digestibility of the carbohydrate in barley is only 80% or is only 20% in that beginning of the tract. So 80% of it goes and causes all the problems we were talking about of things that don't get digested correctly in the beginning. So again, healthy fats, the only choice we have if we limit or change carbohydrate content of a diet is change the type of carbohydrate from easy to digest to hard to digest, or use a healthy fat. And I said healthy because we don't want those frankenfats. We don't want those fried foods and those kinds of things. So for two totally different reasons, grains are not good for humans or horses the way they've been manipulated in this type of thing. And then energy requirements vary with everything you can imagine. I just put, et cetera, because the age of the person, the growth stage, if there's work involved, bodybuilders, distance runners, all these kinds of things are going to affect our energy. So that's our basic energy summary. Okay.
Dr. Judy, can you go back one slide?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So folks, we're looking, the circle is the stomach.
Yep.
And then the small rectangle is the small
intestine.
And then you've got the large intestine.
Right.
So everything goes through the stomach, but doesn't necessarily get broken down.
Most things don't get broken down until after the stomach. Right. I mean, it starts digestion of starches and sugars, the amylase. And then once you get to that starts in the mouth and it goes in the stomach a little bit. But the stomach is mainly just to grind things up. And the key thing about the stomach is the pH is extremely low. In other words, it's very acidic. In order to get your minerals,
And it's supposed to be, right?
Exactly. The huge thing about our digestive tract is it has to be acidic in some places and less acidic in others, and almost basic in other places, because our minerals, we won't absorb our minerals correctly if we have a basic stomach. And that's why antacids are doing the worst thing you can do. If you don't have enough stomach acid, what happens is things go in and they don't get broken down because the acid breaks them down. So then the bacteria start working on them. And there are bacteria in the stomach and small intestine also, but they wouldn't be able to live in the acidic environment like it's supposed to be. But what happens is those foodstuffs that are in the stomach, when it's not acidic enough, bacteria start breaking them down. And what do bacteria produce?
More bacteria? Oh,
Gas.
gas.
Yeah. When they're eating something and metabolizing it, they produce gas. So what is heartburn? Gas produced by bacteria eating food because the stomach didn't have enough acid. So by not understanding that, people say take an antacid. It's the opposite. What you need to do, and again, that was the whole don't eat salt. Don't eat salt. Should not eat salt. Salt is sodium chloride. Chlorine is in hydrochloric acid, our stomach acid. So the whole thing about don't eat salt, don't eat fat, all these kinds of things are a mistake in the understanding of the physiology of the body. But in each place, so then very quickly after the stomach, the pH is very, very low in the stomach, okay, which means very acidic. Then we've got to get our gallbladder kicking out our bile and our pancreatic enzymes and everything coming in right there. And we quickly raise the pH again to a more normal pH, more like water. And we start working on the things that are happening in here. But the stomach, we've got to break down those things like proteins and fats and things in that stomach with the pH very low. Then we let it come back up to normal, roughly normal. So
when you've got bacterial overgrowth in the small intestines, is that because of food choices or pH, or not able to reach the right pH because of food choices?
all of the above. Anything that changes the pH of the stomach, food that you put in, and acids that you take, anything like that that changes that is going to change what happens in the small intestine. Right?
So where are we going to get the most absorption from the nutrients? Is it kind of even throughout the system, through the small and the large intestines, or?
Okay, well, with the diagrams here, and these are rough, these are by category, but basically you can see that your fats are going to be worked on, but they're at some point before the end of the small intestine, they're going to come out. Because if they didn't, this is the fermentation vat. This is a huge fermentation vat. And we don't want our fats in there. Right? So they're basically going to come out unless you grossly overeat fat. Your proteins, by the time they're somewhere in the small intestine, I didn't separate it by sections of the small intestine here. I'm just doing it in general. Our amino acids are going to come out here. And our glucose is fairly simple, so it's going to come out right away. I mean, is that making sense? It's somewhere in the small intestine.
When you say that they come out, is
Into
that
into the bloodstream?
Okay.
Into the bloodstream, or in the case of fats, they have to go into the lymph. They have to go into chylomicrons, which allow them to go through, but coming into the body, because right here, we're not in the body yet, right? The stomach, our food goes in a tube that's inside our body, but things are not inside our body until they go into the blood or the lymph. Right?
All right.
So if we don't basically our digestive system is a tube. Starts at the mouth, goes all the way through, you know where it ends. And so anything that goes all the way through, we didn't get to make energy from it. That's basically the difference. We don't get to make energy from it. But this goes into the blood, amino acids go into the blood, fats go into, depending on which one it is, the medium chain fatty acids do not have to go through the lymph. Everything else goes through the lymph system, because remember, our blood is a watery liquid. So we don't want to be having too many fats in there, and the fats that are in there have what's called a chylomicron, and it's a little place with fats on the outside, or I'm sorry, water soluble on the outside, and we can put our fats on the inside. It's like putting them in a little balloon so that they can go, our triglycerides and stuff can go through the system. Okay. But almost everything we eat should come out and be usable. The only thing that isn't is those indigestible fibers, because here, even the digestible fibers, they didn't come out anywhere here, but they get in here, they're in that vat, the bacteria are working on them, and the bacteria make little short chain fats that we can use. Okay.
So is that why they recommend more fiber in a diet when somebody has a hard time having a regular bowel movement?
You sure want more fiber, and you want more indigestible fiber even, actually. But all our vegetables have got a certain amount of indigestible fiber and digestible fiber. But yes, a lot of people who are constipated have a lack of fiber in the diet. Now, let's say you
don't like to eat their veggies.
I know. But you don't want to go too overboard on the veggies either. It's amazing. We have such a because all of the vegetables, there are components in all the vegetables where the vegetable is sort of protecting itself from being eaten. So if you've heard of things like lignans, and stuff like that, where they're kind of like a poison to us. And it's either a lot or a little. Okay. So, okay, people who want to eat an all meat diet, they're going to be lacking fiber. They're going to be lacking smooth transition of things through the tract. There's no fiber in meat. Now, there are connective tissues that are not going to be digestible. So, you may get something there, but opposite end, if you're eating only vegetables and nothing else, then you're lacking nutrients, you're lacking your vitamins and minerals have to have a certain pH, and they have to have a certain fat content. When we talk about fat soluble vitamins, you can't absorb your fat soluble vitamins at all, A, D, E, K, if you're not eating any fat or absorbing any fat. So if you try to go on a no fat diet, you will be deficient in those fat soluble vitamins, and that's not good either. I mean, your vitamin E, all of them, all the vitamins, vitamin D, vitamin A, they're all crucial. And that's why it's better if you're working somehow towards a variety in the diet, and that means with plants and animals. Now, everybody has their own choice of what they want to do as far as, their customs, their religions, and all those things, and that's fine. But to feed yourself the way you're intended to be fed, there are essential nutrients that you have to have. So I could say, well, I don't believe in vitamin D. I'm not going to eat any. I'm not going to have any. In this case, you'd have to stay out of the sun all the time too, but I'm not going to have any. You will survive to a certain point, and then you will die because it's essential. And we talk about 90 essential nutrients.
Yep.
That's a lot of essential nutrients that we have to have. Now we can take our 90 for Life supplements, and that guarantees we're getting the well, I shouldn't say guarantees, but if they're absorbed, we're getting our ultra trace, our trace, our macro minerals, our vitamins, and all those things. But then we still have a choice of our carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to build our bodies and to provide energy for our bodies, right? So we have all this choice in the foods, but then we better make sure we're getting those smaller things, the vitamins and minerals. And as we know, the minerals aren't in the soil anymore. I mean, we've pretty much farmed away most of the minerals over the last century. And that's why people get so many of these different disorders, is because they're not meeting their essential nutrient needs. Because it's always been, if you eat a good diet, you'll be fine. Well, everybody thinks they're eating a good diet, and most everybody's not fine. Right?
That's sure. Well,
I mean,
we're
that's
at
how
the
it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, we're at the end of our show, but let's close with this one last question that Linton has.
Okay.
And he asks, how does this relate to leaky gut and autoimmune disease?
Okay, that's a great one. This is what's supposed to happen as far as the absorption in all these, here in the small intestine, mostly the absorption. This is what's supposed to happen. If the cell membrane leaks, what that means is something, often gluten, has damaged those cell membranes. What else damages cell membranes? Lack of vitamin C, lack of vitamin E, selenium. A lot of different nutrients keep our cells functioning correctly. Lack of the correct essential fatty acids. If any of those things are missing, then those cells that line the digestive tract become what we call leaky. And what that means is things that are not broken down all the way yet, things that can be harmful to us, get into our blood, get into our cells, and then into our blood, and then cause basically what people call autoimmune disease. Is, again, there are all kinds of schools of thought on this, but the most current one that I think is probably accurate, that there's all kinds of research. Everybody can do their own research. is it's really not your body attacking itself, because we know our body knows self from non-self. What it is that something leaked in that is so similar to self that when it attacks that thing, it somehow misinterprets, or it's kind of been conditioned. And again, it's, you know, people say it's attacking yourself. Not exactly, but it's attacking things so similar to yourself that you get all the inflammation and you get all the, you know, the downstream problems are inflammation, because that stops things. You know, all your cells come together to try to fix it. And then too much inflammation leads to almost everything. Okay. We need a little inflammation to heal. We need a lot of it to fix the problem. But again, not having the stomach and the small intestine and everything working correctly with the amount of acid, I mean, you have to make an enzyme. It's a protein. So you have to have the components to make that protein. If it's not there, you won't make the enzyme. You won't digest the food. Then that undigested food leaks in, and your body's trying to fight that battle against whatever leaked in. Hopefully that helps, because, you know, these questions tie into so many things. But
Well, and that ties right into like the healthy body digestion pack, where you're getting the 90 essential nutrients. You're getting the enzymes that help break things down. That also includes the ox bile. So you're getting the lipase and the protease, and I think amylase is in there as well, that help to break down that food.
right.
And you're also getting the Flora FX, which helps to create a happier gut biome when it comes to the prebiotics, probiotics type things in the digestive system.
Right. And I haven't even addressed herbs at all here.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, I mean, herbs are plant. They're not considered food. They don't provide energy, but they have all kinds of functions, and they're, you know, they were the original medicines.
Yes.
So
I love the original medicines. And Joe is saying, I need more of Dr. Judy an hour. So that is fantastic. I love the fact that we have some people that really want to dig deep
right.
into nutrition and how things are working within the body, getting that into that more scientific mode, rather than, okay, just tell me what I need so I can take it. Tell me why not to take this. You know, some of us like to go a little deeper than that. And we are so honored, Dr. Judy, to be able to have you here with us and available to go deeper. We've got Lenore saying, very interesting. Thank you. Another one is, this is interesting. Please come back and teach more, Dr. Judy. So I love the fact that this is Daily with Doc and Becca, and I can have all of the amazing docs that have been following Dr. Wallach on with us and bringing in more of their specialties and things that they have learned and linked from their field of expertise to the research that Dr. Wallach has done that has helped millions of people and their animals around the world be able to choose a healthier health journey.
And thanks to the animals, because all the research and a lot of what we found out is, you know, through working with animals. So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Judy. We're going to have to schedule our next time where we will get into the herbs part of it too. And I know she has lots of topics to teach about, folks. So make sure that you are staying tuned with us. Make sure that you also are part of our newsletter subscriber base. You can do that by going to dailywithdoc.com. DailywithDoc.com and find that option to subscribe to our newsletter. And before I forget, for those of you who have ever thought of becoming a certified holistic health coach, the Institute of Holistic Health is offering a Black Friday special, which is 50% off our certified holistic health coach course. So folks, we've already have the most affordable health coach certification course on the market, and now it's 50% off. You can get more information by going to coachwithbecca.com. That's coachwithbecca.com. And when you register, use that promo code SAVE50, all lowercase, SAVE50, to get 50% off the course. Now, with that being said, if somebody shared this program with you and you're interested in doing the course, make sure that you get back with them and say, hey, do you have a special link that I can use to get registered for the Certified Holistic Health Coach from the Institute of Holistic Health? They may have one. If they don't know what you're talking about, then please go to coachwithbecca.com. If I could get my co-hosts up with me, let's go ahead, and we've got to do a wrap up here as we've got other appointments coming up as well. And I just want to say thank you to my co-hosts. We have Sherry, who is helping to let people in. She's watching cameras and watching out on the different platforms as well. We have Albert, who is letting people in and watching cameras also and watching the chat. And we have Marilyn, who is active in adding information to the chat as the guests and myself are speaking, so that we can, it's like you're listening and I'm like, wait, I'm trying to take notes. It's like, wait, what did they say? She types faster than most people can listen. So we are very honored and blessed to be able to have Marilyn doing that in our chat. So folks, if you want to join us live, that's one of the biggest benefits right there, is being able to see what is actually written in black and white, and you can take screenshots of what pertains to you and grabs your interest. And we have AJ, who is helping with all of the streams, making sure that everything is connected properly, watching the different channels for comments and helping to add those comments also. Making sure that they get addressed and looked at. I know there was a couple questions we didn't get to. Thank you, Joe. I think we have an amazing show also. And it's because we have talents coming together, bringing information to you so that you can be an empowered individual, making better choices to create the optimal health journey you're looking for. My name is Becca Dukes. Thank you again for joining us here on Daily with Doc. Go to DailywithDoc.com, get that good foods, bad foods list so that you know the things going in your mouth are not hindering your body's ability to do what it was designed to do. Until next time, we'll see you. And this week, for those of you who follow us, for this week, which is week of November, that's going to mess up our be able to revisit. Sorry, AJ. We'll see you next time, folks. Bye for now.
Record.
Bye.